Well, hey everyone, and welcome to Groundswell Online. My name's Jeremy, and I'm on the team here at Groundswell. And man, it's great to have you tuning in with us here today. Whenever you're joining us for this online gathering, or wherever you're tuning in from, man, it's such a privilege to have you here with us today in this way. And man, if it's your first time being here today, I just want to say thanks for clicking the link, for accepting the invitation, for being here with us for this next time together. We're going to hear another message from our friend Jeff Brody as we continue in our series looking at the spiritual side of mental health. The series called When You're Not Okay that we've been in for the last couple weeks. If you haven't been with us the last couple weeks, would encourage you to go back and listen to those messages. They've been so helpful so far. I'm believing that today's is going to be as well. But I want to say, hey, if you're looking to get more connected with us at Groundswell, there are ways for you to do that. Make sure you check out some of the links in the video description below, links to our social media, to Facebook and Instagram, links to our connection card where you can get on our email list and get in the loop on everything going on at Groundswell in the days and the weeks ahead. I would really encourage you to go ahead and do that. A couple things coming up that I want to make sure you're aware of. If sometimes you join us in person at Groundswell in Truro, you need to know that next weekend, September the 3rd, we will not be gathering in person. We'll be here online. We'll be gathering for Groundswell online, but we won't be gathering in person as it is our Sabbath Sunday. This has become part of our rhythm over the last couple of years at Groundswell, where every year, a couple times a year, we take a weekend to basically stop, to rest, and to remember all that God has done in the year past before we move into all that He has for us in the year ahead. And so before we dive into this fall at Groundswell, we're just taking some time as a church to stop and to rest and to catch our breath and to just remember all that God has done and believe together that He's going to do some incredible things in the days ahead. And so just note that next weekend, Sunday, September 3rd, there'll be no in-person gatherings at Groundswell. And then we'll be back on Sunday, September the 10th, for our 10 a.m. gathering in Truro. And then the following weekend, Sunday, September 17th, we're gonna be celebrating 5 years of Groundswell. Crazy that it's been 5 years, incredible all that God has done. And we wanna celebrate that and all that God has done, all that He's gonna do. We wanna invite you to join us at our Prince Street location at 759 Prince in Truro at 10 a.m. On the 17th of September as we celebrate together. We're gonna have a ton of fun stuff happening after the gathering on that Sunday. And during the service, among other things, we're gonna be hosting baptisms. And now if you're someone who's not been baptized and you've made a decision to follow Jesus, you can be baptized on Sunday, September the 17th. We encourage you, if that's you, if you know someone, to find the link in the video description below, just a quick form for us to hear a little bit more about you're considering being baptized, maybe your decision to be baptized. We would love to connect with you. We'd love to have a conversation with you. That's happening on the 17th, our 5-year anniversary Sunday. It's gonna be incredible and we would love to have you there for it. One last announcement I just want to put on your radar. We're kicking off Alpha at the end of September, and if you're someone who's new to Christianity or wouldn't consider yourself a Christian yet and you have questions, man, you got to check out Alpha. You can sign up through our website, groundswellchurch.ca. It's just an incredible space with great people and great food and good conversation where you can come and just judgment-free ask your questions. And so if that's you or someone you know, we can encourage you to consider checking out Alpha starting at the end of September. But that's all for now from me. I'm gonna hand it off to Jeff as we move ahead in our series, When You're Not Okay, looking at the spiritual side of mental health.
So really excited to share with you this morning, and I wanna start with a question. And the question I wanna ask you today is, what do you do when there is a gap in your life? What do you do when there's a gap in your life? Jeff, what do you mean by a gap? What do you mean by a gap? Like a gap between the known and the unknown. When there's a gap between the known and the unknown. You know, maybe for you, you take your 16-year-old and you give them the keys to the car for the very first time, and you don't know what's going to happen on the other side. I'm getting real personal right away, right? The gap between the known and the unknown. Or maybe for you, you know that you've got somebody who's going to junior kindergarten this year. And any parent who's done that knows how that feels. It's the gap between the known and the unknown. I'm with them every moment of the day, and now they're going to be away at school, and I'm not going to know anything that's happening in their life. Maybe for you, it's an exam or a test, and you just don't know how you're going to perform on it. There's a gap between the known and the unknown. Maybe it's a blind date. How about that? A gap between the known and the unknown. What do you fill that gap with? Do you fill it with fear? Do you fill it with frustration? Do you fill it with sadness? Do you fill it with anxiousness? What do you fill it with? How about this one? Today and the future. What do you fill that gap with? Today and the future. Today, the interest rates are where they are. Tomorrow, they might be somewhere else. Too close to home too soon, right? The gap between today and the future. Maybe you've got a test coming up this week, a medical test. You're trying to diagnose a problem that you're having medically. And you don't know what the test result's going to be. And you know where you're at today, but where you're going to be in the future. Maybe for you, it's home ownership for you. Maybe for you, it's a job. There are lots of gaps in our lives. One of the gaps is between the real and the ideal. There can be gaps in our marriage. We thought it would be one thing, and now it's become something else, and we can fill them with all kinds of different emotions. But one of the things that we fill our gaps with the most often is worry. It's worry. Now, I want to talk for a moment about worry because worry can be good. There's part of us that's wired for worry. Right? If you are about to cross the street and there's a snowplow coming your way, it's good for you to worry. You don't want to step in front of the snowplow and be like, well, I'm not worried. That's not good. Right? There is something about worry that's good. Worry can be good when it's warning you, when it's the adrenaline's flowing because there's something that you're in danger of. I mean, worry can be a good thing sometimes. But worry can also, it can be your grasp at the illusion of control, can't it? When you're worried about things that really, at the end of the day, you have no control over. Why are you worrying? Because you're trying to get control. It's just a grasp at the illusion that somehow I can control this situation. Your son or your daughter went off to university, and you no longer know what they're doing every day. And you're trying to figure out, how do I control it? I just lie there and I worry every night. I worry about what's going to happen with my son or my daughter in the future. I worry about what's going to happen with my job because I hear there might be cuts coming. All things that are outside of your control, but we worry because we're trying to get control in some way. Things that we have, in a lot of cases, no control over. There's this quote from someone named Corrie ten Boom, and it says this, and I think it's so true. Worry doesn't empty tomorrow of its sorrows. It empties today of its strengths. Its strength. Isn't that true? Worrying about something you can't control and is slowly depleting your own strength. So what about anxiety? What's anxiety? Because anxiety and worry to me are like cousins. You've got worry and you've got anxiety. So what's the difference between the two? Well, this is kind of my definition of what anxiety is. Anxiety is unchecked worry that moves from your mind to your body. This is a definition that I made up coming from someone who struggles with anxiety. It's no longer something I worry about and then kind of let go, but it becomes unchecked. You start worrying and worrying and worrying about that thing. You start ruminating about it. You start thinking about it. You start thinking about it as you drive. You start thinking about it as you go this place or that place. You continue to ruminate and think about it. And then now you're worried about this thing and you're worried about that thing. And those things aren't in check anymore. Now you're worried about all those things. And so you're worried about your job and you're worried about your finances and you're worried about what this person thinks and that person thinks. And then what happens in anxiety when you leave it unchecked is you start creating gaps where there are no gaps. You have a conversation with someone and you walk away and you think, man, do you think they really like me? Or did they really mean that when they said that? When they told me that they really appreciate me, did they really mean that? Or actually, was that kind of like a backhanded comment? And then you start to ruminate about all the conversations you're having, and you start thinking the worry goes unchecked. The next thing you know, you're talking about, what if I get hit by a tornado? And what's going to happen in my life? And what if I lose my job? And what happens with the finances? And now you're checking and checking and checking your RSPs because you think you're never going to be able to retire, and it just keeps going. It's worry left unchecked. And what happens is, it's no longer just up here. You feel it in your body. You get tightness in your shoulders. You get headaches. You get a tight chest. That's what anxiety is like. Now, what does psychology have to say about all this? I've been talking about neurology on the other weeks, but today I want to talk about psychology. What does it say about worry and anxiety? Well, a lot. If you Google it, you will find a lot. I want to share with you something really simple today that has been really helpful to me, and it's from a psychiatrist named Dan Siegel. And he talks about something called a window of tolerance. And this curve here represents stress in your life. And what happens is you experience stress, the stress kind of peaks, and then it goes down the other side. We've all experienced that. There are things that you were stressed about before that you're not stressed about now. I remember there were Christmas gifts as a kid I was stressed I wouldn't get. I don't stress about them anymore. There were relationships you were stressed about, you're not stressed about now. You come out on the other side of stress. And the good news is this is your window of tolerance. That's how much stress you can tolerate. And so if your window of tolerance is big enough to handle the wave of stress as it comes through, you're good. And how do you kind of keep that window of tolerance big? Well, you exercise and you eat well and you make sure you get the sleep that you need. All these are all things. You get a break, you go on vacations. All these things help keep our window of tolerance large enough to handle our stress in many cases. But what happens is over time, our window of tolerance, of course, sometimes shrinks because we have kids and other things. But what happens is the stress at a certain point, there are stressors that go outside of our ability to tolerate them. And when they do that, our body says, this is a dangerous thing to us. And we move into fight or flight mode. And we start to experience anxiety, and we start to become overcome, and we start to become overwhelmed. In fact, our window of tolerance can get smaller and even smaller. And now every stress, just when it starts to trigger us and trigger us and trigger us and trigger us. We're stressed about things as soon as they come up. And this is what it looks like often to live in a world of anxiety. This past summer, some of you will know, I decided after 20 years of ministry, COVID had done a number on me, and I thought, I need to take a 3-month break. And this is why. Because I realized that I was in fight or flight mode a lot of the time. My window of tolerance had gotten too small. So what does that look like? Well, at work, I was in fight mode. So what does that mean? Was I angry at everybody here, raging, pounding on the conference table? Of course not. But I was micromanaging a lot of people. And I was trying to have my fingers in a little bit of everything. Trying to get control. Trying to maintain control. And then at home, I was in flight mode. I was withdrawn, struggling to have energy to engage my family, finding myself staring at the scrolling on screens, and disengaging from the people who I love the most. And I realized I needed to grow my window of tolerance. I wouldn't have called it that. Many of you have lived or are living that way today. Sometimes when you're at home, you're in fight mode. Everything is setting you off. Every stressor is setting you off. I can't believe you left that on the floor again. Why don't you clean your room? Everything is triggering, because your window of tolerance is so small. For those of you who have little kids at home, who are exhausted all the time, and you wonder, man, why do I feel so stressed out? It's because of the lack of sleep. The window of tolerance is small. But I've got some good news for you today. I've got some good news for you on this. Your mind is connected to your soul. That in addition to sleep and exercise and good food, there's so many spiritual things that you can do to keep your window of tolerance large. That you can, they say prayer helps you grow your window of tolerance. They say that gathering together with other people in community, when you join a small group here, when you volunteer here and you get on a team, there's people around you, you experience community that grows your window of tolerance. Singing with people actually grows your window of tolerance. How many places do you get to do that other than church? There's probably not like a singing group at work, you know? reading the truths of Scripture, meditating on who God is. I mean, mindfulness is one thing, but mindfulness ends with you. But meditating on who God is and what the truths of Scripture are, these are things that grow your window of tolerance. Your mind is connected to your soul. You're growing your window of tolerance by being here right now. But what does Scripture have to say about worry and anxiety? Because that's really why you're here. What does Scripture have to say about it? Well, we're going to actually look today at 4 verses written by the Apostle Paul. And if you don't know the Apostle Paul was a church planner. He's got quite a history we won't get into today. And the Apostle Paul writes to a church in Philippi. And this is a group of this church in Philippi, and the Christians who were there, he's already been imprisoned. Many of them are afraid to be arrested. They're being persecuted. There is a huge gap for them between the known and the unknown. What's going to happen? I know I'm here today, but I could be in jail tomorrow. I could be arrested tomorrow. I could be beat up tomorrow. I could be killed tomorrow for my faith. And Paul, who dealt with worry himself, shares with them what to do. And he shares with them this truth, that peace is a practice. He shares with them that peace is a practice. And he walks them through a step-by-step practice of peace. And so that's what I want to look at today in Philippians chapter 4. And this is where it starts. He says this. He says, always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Always be full of joy in the Lord. Find joy in your faith. Find joy in who God is. I say it again, rejoice. Now, why, if Paul is going to talk about worry, why does he talk about joy? And here's why I think that is. Because when I talk to people who struggle with anxiety, and I talk to people who struggle with depression, and a number of other mental health challenges, one of the number one things I hear isn't, I just want peace. The number one thing I hear is, I wish I could have joy back in my life again. That if you're somebody who struggles with anxiety, I'm willing to bet that you know deep down that that's true. That you wish you could experience joy again. I remember many times when my anxiety was at its worst, and I'd shared some of that on week 1, and you can go back and watch that. I remember many, many times that I wish I could just enjoy life again. I remember going with my family to the mall at Christmas. It's supposed to be a great time, right? You go at Christmas and you got like, you're going to go buy gifts and you're vibing to the Christmas music in the mall and you're all walking together and, it's a great time and you all go to the food court and eat something that you shouldn't and like, it's fantastic. Celebrating with family. My family might be enjoying it, but I couldn't. Because I was anxious that I would meet somebody from the church and not know their name. And think, how would that look if a pastor doesn't know somebody's name who goes to their church? And I could barely get myself out the door to go to the mall. I couldn't enjoy things my family was enjoying. And some of you, when you deal with anxiety, you know what that's like. To be at a party and everybody's having a great time and you barely got there because you're so worried about what somebody's going to think of you, that you might say the wrong thing. Anxiety robs people of their joy. See, I think the deepest emotional desire of an anxious person is joy. That if you struggle with anxiety and depression, you just want the joy back. Brene Brown, if you follow her, she says this. She says, joy collected over time fuels resilience, ensuring we'll have reservoirs of emotional strength when hard things do happen. Not only do we want our joy back, it's actually joy that we need to be resilient. So Paul, tell us, how do I choose or experience this joy in the face of anxiety? We want to know. Give us the skinny on what it means. Do people still say that? Give us the skinny? I don't know. I think I just dated myself. Sorry. how do I choose to experience this joy in the face of anxiety? How do I do it? Well, this is what Paul says. This is what he says. He says, don't worry about anything. Now, I just want you to know, this is the worst advice you could ever give somebody who worries. And some of you have given this advice. I don't get it. Like, why doesn't he just stop? Why is he worrying about all this stuff? Like, I don't get it. Just stop worrying. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Okay, Paul, you're going to have to give us a little bit more. Now, the thing I want you to know is what Paul isn't saying here. You got to look at it in context of all the passages on worry, I think. Where in Peter it says, cast all your cares on Jesus, for he cares for you. There are so many passages where Jesus encourages people not to worry and says, hey, I see you like I see all the sparrows. I know the number of hairs on your head. What Paul is saying here isn't don't worry. What he's saying is don't worry. What Paul's saying is I want to invite you into an experience where you're not worrying. And he says this, instead, pray about everything. Now, what's interesting is he doesn't say, pray about the thing you're worried about. He says, pray about everything. What Paul wants to do here is teach you a practice of peace. He says, I want you to pray about everything. Well, everything, like, how do I do that? Like, just, pray, I'm going to pray about world peace and inflation. Like, what do I pray about? He says this. He says, tell God what you need and thank him for all he's done. To me, this is like prayer. And what is prayer? Here's one sentence. Tell God what you need and thank him for what he's done. Pray about everything. I mean, the little things, the big things, everything. I have a mom who prays about everything. I remember so many times in my life, I'm like, Mom, I can't find my keys. I can't find my phone. Can you help me look for them? And her first response, 100% of the time is, well, did you pray about it? I'm like, I don't think God cares about where my keys are or that I lost my phone. And she's like, I think he does. And then, of course, you pray and then you find the keys. But anyway, for my mom, that's how she lives her life. She prays about everything. You tell her you're trying to get an appointment with a specialist. She's praying about that on the way out the door. Not a long prayer, but she's praying about it. Every single moment of the day, she's trying to remind herself of the practice of peace, which is to continue to pray. It's amazing to me when I meet people in my life and they go through just some incredibly difficult things that they worry about. And what happens is, I just think, how are they doing that? How are they being so peaceful? How are they being so strong? And you find out prior to when that happened, they were people of prayer. Not the kind of people who you would see them, oh, I'm praying, I have this intense prayer all day long, but they're praying through their day, every day, telling God what they need, thanking him for what he's done. Okay, Jeff, so when I do pray, why doesn't God take away my anxiety? Great question. I have been there. And I think it's the way that we see prayer that we have to realize what prayer really is. Because so often we can just say, God, just take the gap away. God, just take the gap away. Take the problem away. Take the circumstance away. Just take it away so I don't have to be anxious about it anymore. Just take it away. Or just take my anxiety away. Just take it away. And it's not that he can't, but that's not really what prayer is about. Prayer isn't about changing your circumstance. It's about choosing who you trust. It's about declaring who you trust. I was in Atlanta one night, and I got a phone call from my wife, Leslie. My mother-in-law was helping her watch the kids, and she walked out in the middle of the night. She was going to the bathroom, and she walked right off the stairs. And she shattered her hip. And so Leslie called me. I'm like in Atlanta. I didn't know what to do. And so I said to her, well, you got to go with your mom to the hospital. And our kids were little. She said, what are we going to do with the kids? It's like 2 a.m. And my immediate response was, who are we going to call? And what I didn't do was call a random number on my phone and say, hey, could you come watch my kids? I didn't even call a neighbor. I thought, who are the people who I trust? In the midst of the most difficult circumstance, who is the person I can trust the most? That's what prayer is. Going to the person that you know you can trust the most and saying, I'm not sure I totally know what's going to happen here. And God, you might not take away my circumstance, and this thing might not change, but I want to let you know that I'm trusting in you. I'm trusting in you to get me to the other side of the curve. I'm trusting you to get me through the circumstance. I'm trusting you to get me to the other side of this anxious moment. Tim Keller, theologian, says this. He says, we often think the challenge is our circumstance, but our challenge is in how we see our lives. That while this situation might be in front of you, this unknown might be in front of you, this thing you can't control might be in front of you, God continues to say, I have a plan for you. I have a purpose for you. I love you. I care about you. And even though it might feel like I'm not present, I want to be present with you. You see, the thing that happens is God's purpose for you brings perspective to your worry. When you say, I'm going to trust in you because I know you're bigger than this. I'm going to trust in you because I know you've got a purpose for my life. I'm going to trust in you, God. And I don't even totally get it, God, but I'm trusting in you in this moment, knowing that you continue to have a purpose and a plan for me, and you want to have a relationship with me. I'm calling you because I trust in you. Because you have a purpose for my life. There's a woman named Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book called Grit. And it's a great book. It talks about why people have resilience in their lives. And she talks about something called grit paragons. And grit paragons are people who seem to just be able to handle stress when it comes their way. And what happens with grit paragons, she found out when she studied them, is they all were people who knew a greater purpose. That they could push through anything because their purpose was to build this business. They could push through anything because their purpose was to transform this community. They could push through anything because they had a greater purpose. And that's what prayer is. It's reminding yourself of your greater purpose. The fact that God loves you. And that he cares about you. And he has a plan for your life. And he has a purpose for you. And while it might not feel like it in this moment, he promises that he will be with you no matter where you go. And while this circumstance might be in front of you, you're reminded of the purpose that God has for you. From now into eternity when you choose to follow him. And when you do that, you're resilient. When you do that, you get perspective on your worry. Okay, so it's pray about everything, tell God what you need, thank him for what he's done. So you do that, and he says, and then what you're going to do, you're going to be reminded of your purpose, you're going to pray about everything, and then he says this is what Paul says. He says, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. Then you're going to experience a peace in your life. Then you're going to experience something in your life that's going to ground you. Now, here is the thing I want to tell you about experiencing this kind of peace. We think peace is when you don't have anxiety. And what I've learned is that I can have anxiety and peace at the same time. I think that's really important if you've never thought about it. Because I can feel the tightness in my chest, or I can feel the tingling in the back of my head, and I can feel myself getting anxious, but I can also at the same time remind myself that I can continue to move forward because God is with me. I continue to move forward because I know what's true. I continue to move forward that despite how I might feel, that God is present with me. Peace isn't the absence of anxiety. It's the presence of God in your life. Think about it. It's not just take my anxiety away. It's be present with me in the midst of it. Be present with me in the midst of my worry. Be present with me as I'm on the curve. In fact, then it says this. It says, his peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. That as you have this practice of peace, it's going to guard your heart and it's going to guard your mind. Your mind for worry, your heart for anxiety. As you practice praying about everything, telling God what you need, thanking him for what he's done, it's going to protect you and continue to give you that peace. Honestly, when I think about this verse, I often think about downhill skiing, and you'll know why in a minute. How many people, put your hand up, Aurelia, here if you've been downhill skiing. Anybody? Okay, good. So if you've been downhill skiing, this is what you know. That this moment is not the moment to put your helmet on. Right? You don't hold your helmet on your belt, and then whenever you feel you're going down, then you try to put it on as fast as you can. I mean, you can try that. But what Paul is saying is the whole point is to wear your helmet the whole time. He's saying when you have this practice of peace, when you're praying to God, you're telling him what you need, you're thanking him for what he's done, then you're going to continue to have peace because of the protection that he gives you, because you're wearing your helmet. And then Paul has one more thing to say. And I know that because he says this, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. And he says this, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Fix your thoughts. He's saying, okay, you're praying about everything, you're telling God what you need, you're thanking him for what he's done. Now, fix your thoughts. Fix your thoughts on what? Fix your thoughts on what you're anxious about? Fix your thoughts on what you're worried about? No, he says, I'll tell you what to fix your thoughts on. Fix your thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. He's saying, hey, as you move forward, now that you're kind of praying, you're thanking, you're practicing peace, now as you move forward, man, you want to think about what are you thinking about? Craig Rochelle in the book Winning the War in Your Mind, he says this, our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. So what are you thinking about? Because the world around you, the media around you, the news around you, the social media around you, I'll tell you what it wants you to think about. Fear, fear, fear. It wants you to know there's a gap between the known and the unknown. It wants you to know that there's a gap between today and the future. And you don't know what's going to happen. And you don't know where it's going to go. Fear, fear, fear. And what Paul is saying is, what are you fixing your thoughts on? What are the things that you're worried about? When you think about what you're worried about, ask yourself this, is it true? Is this honorable? Is this right? Is this pure? Is this lovely? Is this admirable? Is this excellent? Is this worthy of praise? He says if it isn't, fix on your thoughts on the things that are. Give that to God. Tell him hey, I thank you, God. This is what I need. I need you to speak into this. And now I want to fix my thoughts on things that are true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable and excellent and worthy of praise. And then he says this, keep putting into practice. He's back to this practice, continuing to retrain our mind. All you have learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing. And then God will take your anxiety away. It's not what he says, is it? He says, and then the God of peace will be with you. Then the God of peace will be with you. I mean, that is the gift of the Christian faith when it comes to the spiritual side of mental health. Is that there is a God who says, I'll be with you. I'll be with you at the beginning of the curve. I will be with you at the peak of the curve. I will be with you on the other side of the curve. I will be with you. See, your anxiety is not an indication of your spiritual life, but it's an invitation to it. It's an invitation to a relationship with God. It's an invitation to say, God, I need to connect with you. God, I want to reach out to you. God, I want you with me in the midst of my situation. Help me understand that it's not a pit that I'm in, but it's a tunnel that I'm in, and you're walking with me through to the other side. So, what does practicing peace look like on Monday? What does it look like for you? What does it look like for me? I told you it would be practical today. 3 simple steps. Pray about everything and tell God what you need. Thank God for what he's already done. And refocus your thoughts. Paul would say, peace is a practice. Peace is a practice. And that's my challenge to you. When you are on the beginning of the curve, take those 3 steps and ask God to meet you in the middle. Now, as I close today, and I've given you 3 practical steps, I want to just tell you a little bit about somebody named Jeremiah, and I want to speak to those of you who have anxiety or have somebody in your life who you're trying to care for who has it. Because we know about this in our house, and I know how hard it can be. And I know that you might say, I don't know, Jeff, like 3 simple steps to anxiety? Are you some kind of blog writer? Like, what is this? And I want you to know that there's a hero in the Bible. His name's Jeremiah. And in Jeremiah's life, he struggles with this. You see him in Lamentations 3. He says, I'm distressed. He said, my distress is making me feel old and worn down. It's zapping my strength. He's crying out to God. He's saying, peace is being peeled away from me. It's being taken away from me. I'm in the darkness. Everything is lost in Lamentations 3. And as somebody who deals with anxiety, if that's you or someone you love, you know what that's like. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to just be tired and just fatigued by all the anxiety and feeling like you don't have any strength left. I know what it's like to feel like it's kind of eroding your soul. I know what it's like to go to a place and feel anxious. I know what it's like to not feel like you can do something or go somewhere. I know what it's like to be up late at night and wondering. I know what it's like to get up at 3 a.m. and all of those things. And I know what it's like in the darkest times. I've got some idea. And so did Jeremiah. And if you've never read Lamentations 3, you should read it. But then this is what Jeremiah says, and I want to say it to you today. He said, yet I still dare to hope. I dare to hope. He says, when I remember this, that the faithful love of the Lord never ends, his mercies never cease. On the days I'm not feeling it, I'm reminding myself of who God says I am, and that he has mercies, and that he loves me, and he has a purpose for me, and he has a plan for me, even if it doesn't feel that way today. He says, great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. What does that say to me? It says to me, there's going to be another day, that I will get to the other side of this. And I want you to know that you will get to the other side. There is another end of the tunnel, but you don't have to do it alone. That Jesus says, I want to do it with you. And then he says to this, I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. If you struggle with anxiety or you're tired from caring for someone who does, my encouragement to you today is dare to hope. Dare to hope. Dare to hope that there is a God who sees you and loves you and wants to walk with you and says, cast all your cares on me because I can care for you. Let me pray. God, we come to you today, and Paul gives us such practical spiritual steps today, and we thank you for them. But we also thank you that even the heroes of our faith are people who had to at times dare to hope, knowing that you would be present with them, knowing that you would walk alongside them, knowing that you would be with them and giving them strength in their moments of weakness. God, help us to put our trust in you on the days it's so difficult to do that. Knowing that you have a plan for us, you have a purpose for us, and you're not what our anxiety says we are, or our worry says we are, or our inner critic says we are, but you are who you say we are. And that you are with us always. And that you walk with us, not just to the other side of our anxiety, but when we choose to follow you, you walk with us into eternity. And we pray this in your name.